Dr. Kalenga's covered quite a substantial number of aspects that relates to the post-harvest. What I've done is actually to share, what I'm going to do is to share with you a case study of what I did. The blocked part was the FAO, they call it FAO United Nations project code, which I didn't want to put there. I did one because it was funded by the FAO United Nations in 2 districts. So what we are going to look at today is to go through together and see the process, go through the process of actually training the farmers on post-harvest technology with the view of reducing the losses as a major aspect to it. And Dr. Kalenga has actually gone through that. Sorry, I just clicked somewhere for things that I'm not sure. Let's see. Okay, this is where I ought to be going. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so what had happened was that I did with one of the projects that has to do with the paperwork, strategies for post-harvest technology in Zambia. And I was contacted by the FAO through the office. I was given the task to evaluate what the strategies they have so that we can implement some of them. There's quite a lot of work that has been done in terms of paperwork, sitting in the Ministry of Agriculture. And so I came, and I think I spent about 10 days going through the strategies that the country has put in place. And my responsibility was to try and come up with something that we could implement and design a system to implement. So what I did was to involve the Ministry of Agriculture and some people at the FAO office. So we had various meetings, and they indicated to me that we want to implement something now because there's just been too much of what has been on paper, has been done, meetings and so on. We need something done. So we had several meetings, and amongst the crops that were indicated or selected by stakeholders, we came up with 2 commodity value chains that you can see under the picture there. And we were to train farmers in 2 districts, namely Lusaka district and Mumbwa district. So I agreed, but I indicated that I needed to have people from the ministry as well, because they are the ones that know the camp officers. Because I indicated to them that my training, amongst others, I needed to interact with the farmers, understand what they know, the levels of whatever they do, look at the things they do, their environment in which they work. So I had to do that, incidentally. So they gave me somebody from the ministry who I worked with, is a principal somebody. And then they said, okay, we now would have, one of the things that we are going to do is put things in place. So what I did then was I went back after we did all the nitty-gritties and agreements and so on. We selected, of course, I'm just giving you an overview. I'll go through the slides very briefly. There are very few. And then we have questions and answers. But the basic concepts that I'm going to give are the things that my colleague has mentioned, some of them, if you are very attentive. She has mentioned quite a lot of those basic things that are very important when you deal with a study, particularly in areas where you don't know. And there are things that we are not supposed to be assuming, because farmers, per se, they are not blank. They have a lot of rich knowledge. The concept is, how do we leverage that knowledge and experience in order to help them. So basically, that's the major concept. So the two crops or commodity value chains, the beans and tomato, they were actually selected unanimously by the panels because of, firstly, their, what is the term they used? I want to say the exact term. Quick returns. The beans takes about 3 months, and you can get something. So they were looking at that. And so is the tomato. And the consumption across board throughout the country. Because the idea was that whatever it is that we come up with, we were going to replicate it in another place. Okay? So one of the important factors that, to increase food production, of course, and food was to reduce food losses that we've talked about. So that was our major aspect of what we were going to do. So ours was to look at how the farmers produce this product. So before the project started, I requested that, because they indicated that we needed Lusaka. The selection of Lusaka district was actually unanimously done, and Mumbwa. But I must indicate that I had never been to Mumbwa. The closest I went to Mumbwa was when I was still either in school or just passed by. So I requested that I needed to study the environment and interact with the farmers. Look at, of course, I know about the geological, agroecological zones and so on and so forth, but I needed to know exactly how the farmers are producing their products and also learn about their challenges, not my perceived ones. I would have, from the books and from other reports that I read, I had a fair knowledge, but I needed to validate that with what is on the ground. So my colleague from the Ministry of Agriculture and I went and set camp in Mumbwa for about a week or something like that. And our job was basically to interact with the agricultural officers, the extension officers, because these are the ones that have been teaching and relating with the farmers that we were going to be sharing things with, the knowledge and so on. So we stayed there. We had, there were a number of what they call agricultural camps. And it was interesting to note that there was a lot of enthusiasm on the part of the farmers to participate in the training. Whereas the FAO had only insisted that we train only 45 farmers, we actually ended up training, I think the number was close to 200, eventually. Because we discussed with the farm, what do they call them? Block, what do they call the ones that run a small camp? Camp officers. Okay, I think they called them camp officers. So they were divided into camps, the farmers of a certain area. So we ended up with about more than 12 camps, which had more than 29 farmers or something like at one point. So then they selected other areas randomly, according to the way the camp officers and agricultural officers wanted us to have a training. Okay, anyway, the training was very interesting in the sense that we had people that had indicated they were willing to be trained. And after we had the meeting with them, they indicated that they were going to share with us their knowledge, because during the time of interaction, what we made sure was that we made sure that we are interested in what they know. And it's very important when you get there, because once people know that you are actually going to teach them something, they will sit and wait for you to tell them. So we decided that this one is not something that we're going to do like putting petrol in a car. We were going to exchange knowledge. And after the exchange of the knowledge, then we were going to, my mandate was to make recommendation of how to support these farmers. And I'm not going to exhaust the things because at the end of the training, I must indicate that we had a very big recommendation, including, I don't know what is being done now, because we had to make recommendations to, was it Rome or something like that? That's where they wanted, because there was a representative that was communicating with us. Okay, so I must indicate also those are the things, these are the reasons for the selection. I think for the sake of training ourselves, it's important that we know this. Popularity of the commodity among small-scale producers in the area. And this selection basically was done together with the farm block managers, the one that manage the blocks on the behalf of the government. Low input requirement, I think those were the things, some of the things that were identified. Suitability for production across the country, popularity for consumption, they are all consumed universally across the country. Then, of course, the nutritional value. We do know about the tomato, lycopene, which is very important, and of course the beans. We all know that beans is one of those with foods that have a very low charge. Okay, and if they have a low charge, it means that they play a vital role as an antioxidant or anti-cancer in a way. They are not easily oxidized. They stop that. Okay, so the next slide, we had a meeting organized. And one of the things that we did, because we had to find a neutral place right there in the areas in which farmers live. And that venue was selected by the camp officers themselves. So what we wanted to do was to make sure that these people learn in the environment in which they are comfortable. We didn't want to take them to some provincial something, because then we were going to have a lot of transportation and issues and so on. So the camp officers actually confirmed with them. They were very, so farmers were trained in the areas in which they were comfortable and they are familiar with. And one of the other reasons was that because from there, we would then walk to the nearest fields and have discussions with the farmers. So that's one of the areas which we gathered. Okay, so our main objective of training, of course, was the management to reduce the losses in these aspects of our value chains, the two commodity value chains. So that was the main objective. So the specific ones were to enable farmers to maintain quality of the tomato and common bean value chains, and also, of course, earn something from there. Because they are small-scale farmers. When they reduce the losses, it means we are actually supporting their income in a way, because they will get more of there. But also, it was to embed some knowledge, because we realized during the interaction that there are certain things that they didn't know. They did everything as much as possible, but there are things that we knew scientifically that we wanted to squeeze in within their knowledge base. And also, one of the things that we indicated to them was that we were going to interact and discuss issues and ideas, because then we also wanted to learn from their experiences during the marketing and how they've viewed the losses in that respect. Okay, so the training methodology was we introduced the chain value products, which were not which were not strange, because it's something that we had seen that more than 80% of the farmers had in their fields. And it was interesting that during my evaluation of the strategies, we had peeped in to see some of the products that were growing in the fields. But this one we went through with the farm, what do they call them? Block managers from the agricultural department, the ones that are responsible for them. Okay, so then in our training, recognition of maturity stage for harvesting purposes, harvesting techniques, packaging and packaging materials available and challenges, transit, storage to reduce field heat for tomatoes, transportation to marketplaces. Now, these things that we put together as a training were coming directly as some of them as issues that the farmers themselves had raised or we had picked through discussion. And that's why now coming up with the training, the idea was that it must be relevant to what is happening, not what we want. Of course, we would have wanted to put in a lot of things, but we made sure that we dealt with the things that the farmers were really interested in. Okay, the other aspect we looked at was the containers used in the transportation, demonstration of transportation and storage materials for tomato and common beans, discussion on experiences by farmers in handling their tomato value chains, because what we did was we separated the farmers in some areas, in some groups, to make sure that those that were interested in beans as producers, we grouped them in those areas because they wanted to. Then we swapped to train others in the other commodity, such as tomato and so on and so forth. But all the farmers got training in the two commodity value chains. Okay, but one other important aspect, which I even mentioned in my opening remarks, is that it's very cardinal that the problems that are on the ground come from the horse's mouth themselves. Then they become very, very relevant. So the challenges that we were dealing with in our training had to do with what these guys had, the farmers themselves had put forward. Okay, what I'm indicating there, as I said, although the training took a certain period, the development of the training material took a much longer time because we were on the ground for a longer time, so that when the training started, we had done quite a lot of groundwork, staying away from Lusaka and into Mumbwa. We got to know the lodges that are there. We got to know what it is that they sell in the markets and things like that. But I think it was also a time that there were quite a bit of mosquitoes. I remember finishing one gadget of doom spraying my room because I think one window was broken or something, so everything wanted to come in through somewhere, and it was quite busy. Yeah, so those two things, this culminated into designing some of the transportation or packaging materials. Now, I must indicate that the reason for designing this was that we had to move into all these areas, visit the farmers, and see how they transport materials under natural circumstances. But also spent a lot of time at Soweto. My colleague has already indicated, and she had very good pictures. I identified with those nice pictures. It's a classic example of post-harvest losses. It was a classic. So I came down and I told somebody, there was a person that I was communicating with in Rome, and we indicated that we need to put something quickly because what we have seen of the packages, is there something that can be done? We designed something that we can demonstrate to the farmers because the crates that we saw, the things that they packaged materials in, especially the tomato, was extremely bad. And it was made after investigation. We found that it was actually made by people that had no conceptual knowledge of the reduction of post-harvest, which is not their problem, but that except for business. The people that were making crates, they made those crates only for business. So we came down, went around and designed something. Now those two crates, they are actually sitting on top of each other, but they would protect the tomato, even if it was heavily ripe. It would not sit, the product would not sit on top of each other. And that was supported by the FAO then. That was the concept that we wanted to oppose. But of course, for commercialization, it would have been best, our recommendation was that they make something that would be plastic, but with a similar concept that you can stack up to 10 or more of the tomato crates without the tomato touching each other. Okay, so all the weight would be dissipated along the crate itself. And now with the plastics and new technology, it's much easier for somebody to just manufacture that. So at this particular meeting, you can see that what we decided to do was to, instead of going into very, not tedious, because we had surveyed the levels of our farmers and we didn't want to blast them with other technological or academic kind of situation. So one of the things that we found as problems was, of course, transportation. There was not much they could do. The only thing we tried to do was to engage the government that they maintain the road. The roads were very bad. From the harvesting places, it was a nightmare to bring anything out of there into the main roads. The other one that we could really deal with, we also noted the issue of water, which we indicated to them for those that would have solar panels and then have a pump and get some tanks around and then draw water from there. Because some of them were watering from buckets, they had a few people, and so on and so forth. So we had to train them on what they could do and things like that. Some of them had petrol engines, pumps for water, which was very good because they were all at different levels. So at this particular one, if you see a few tomatoes sitting there, those were actually harvested from the farmers. The idea basically was to utilize one of the concepts of early harvesting. If you don't know when to harvest, then you might harvest at the point where you shorten, I think yesterday we talked about, you shorten the handling period. One of the ways of reducing the post-harvest losses is to allow people to handle your product for a longer time before it is useless or it is over-ripened. So one of the ways is timing of harvesting is one of the things that we could easily implement with the farmers without infrastructure, looking at other infrastructure. And the farmers were able to pick that very well. Now, one of the examples that was very classic example was one of the farmers, who I'll probably show you a picture there, was that he lost, I think, 10 crates out of 40 that he got. And the reason is that he harvested. The harvesting is when it's ripe. Let's now harvest, because now it's ripe. But you have to have a leverage of extending the handling period. Okay? If you harvest it at the 6th stage of ripening, then you don't have much leeway for anybody to handle. And if a farmer or a retailer or middleman, they buy that product, they have very, very short period of time to handle the product before it actually becomes becomes overripen and goes to waste, basically. So that process we had to indicate to them. But also, one of the things that we did was the pest control issues, which we did on the fields with them as part of the training, because we had various sessions. It was quite demanding, but interesting in that people were willing to learn something, given the sheer numbers of people that decided that they wanted to make sure that they come for that training. Okay, now, the crate that was created, a lot of farmers, in fact all of them, were very excited. And they had thought that we were going to distribute those, because this is why we realized one of the farmers who actually gave us the information of how out of 40 crates, 10 of them were thrown away because things were just very, very bad. And one of the examples that we had were some of the crates that they had. They were able to touch and they were able to demonstrate and to see how they were able to protect their products. Okay, now our colleagues from Zari, I saw that they showed this bag. This bag is one of those that are very good. I think it was developed from Purdue University. It's one of those that we had taken for demonstrations. There was one farmer that had stored their product somewhere in a normal container or something. They didn't know what was awaiting them because they just kept it away. What happens with the beans is that if you've packed your bag somewhere, hoping that next year or towards the end of the year, you will come and get your beans. This is what happens. This is what greets you when you open your bag. And it's not a good, it's a very unpleasant kind of situation. You open it, and there it is. There's all manner of weevils and things like that. But with the PIC bag, it utilizes, I think our brother has indicated very well on the mechanics, and I will not go through how it operates, depriving the pests out of the oxygen. So they are very, very good. So what we did, what I did was to get into the markets, and we bought quite a few of those for demonstrations and so on, particularly for people that had beans. And that is one of the problems that was found in some of those areas that people had beans, who had actually been growing beans. So we also taught them. For tomato, it was mainly the control of pests, the timing of harvesting. Those are the major aspects that we shared and discussed with them, and the management, water management as well, before they start harvesting, because it has an effect. Both tomato and both the tomato and the beans, the timing of harvesting is very important, even though it's at different levels. The other one, of course, you want it to dry in a way that the moisture is reduced to a certain level. The other one, you don't want it too much ripen so that you have enough time to handle the product. And that is very, very, very crucial. So as we can see there, we have, if you wait too late for the beans, it shatters during the harvesting. And it's very tedious to start picking the beans or the grain one by one, unless you have quite a big number. Most of our farmers don't have many people to help them to harvest. So it's very important that they do. But then the other aspect that we had to indicate to the farmers during the training is the fact that your beans, the weevils, some of them come in straight when the pods are forming, not at very late time. So, and that is the point at which the control must begin to take place. So all these aspects were aspects that we are blending in with the knowledge that the farmers who are producing beans have, with the scientific, entomological, for those who have done entomology, and these are some of the things that you begin to look at. When is the weakest point at which the infections start, and including, of course, when these weevils begin to attack our products. Okay, I think I've said most of the things, these things that I indicated earlier on, that we had to do a familiarization tour. Now here, this picture indicates one of the days. Some of those that are there are officials from the Ministry of Agriculture, and some of them are camp officers for the area. That was the initial visitation to inspect the various fields of tomatoes and other crops, and discussing with the farmers. So ideally, the training took that route of. And most of the things, the specifics, my colleague has already talked about, but we followed to the book, the training of farmers, so that we made sure that it was as interactive as possible, and at the end, we had to do quite a bit of support for them, because if you look at the bottom there, we had to buy all the farmers that we trained. We gave them PICS bags, in order for them to use. But unfortunately, we could not distribute the crates, although they all wanted that. But we made recommendations that what the government needed to do is to support them in terms of training the people that make crates, so that they make them in a particular way. They were just fabricating them. As long as the farmers put their product in it, that was it. One of the other things that I must mention is that the farmers raised concerns in the sense that at Soweto, the marketing guys were actually, if somebody came from the rural areas out in the outskirts with their product in a truck or anything, then they would make them sit in an office somewhere in Soweto there, and the traders would then be determining the price, and they tell them, sit down, we'll sell the product for you. And they would sell the product at a different price and give them the change. So there were quite a number of things that we recommended for the government to assist our farmers. We have a long way to assist our farmers in a lot of systems, developed systems. when they say they want to support, it is once the farmers are supported and they are doing well, the contribution to economic development is immense. Because for a country that is food secure, you agree with me that the inflation, you are already helping with the curbing of the inflation and so on, and other things. In any case, economic development is the development of the people.